Hi, this is Eternal King, bringing you another gameplay video today. So I wanted to look at Pools. If you don't know, Pools is the most recent Unity engine game that was released, and it's essentially a giant tech demo for, lighting and texture effects. They call it a liminal space game. You can call it a walking simulator. I did want to show it off briefly because I do think it's interesting from a discussion point of view. Again, it's essentially not a game, but a bunch of assets, almost like stock assets thrown together in a way that is compelling. So stuff like this with the wet stairs and the, shining light reflections, it's all very cool and it's all very interesting. But it also makes me wonder about the state of gaming. And again, we can just sit here and contemplate this graffiti for a bit because, again, there's no actual gameplay in this game. But just talking about how gaming has changed. We've essentially gone from major risky productions that ultimately failed, things like Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, Dishonored 2, these sorts of big budget RPGs, to a lot of experimental titles, and we'll keep exploring, but a lot of these experimental titles that can't really offer the same scale of interactivity. They just can't, right? So they can provide experimental design visuals, right? So for example, if you went into, say, Unreal Engine 4, which I've done before, and played around with the assets, which I've done before, you can click and drag them and essentially set them up in any way that you would find convincing or interesting. But again, while any level designer can do that, and if you do it well enough, you could potentially sell it for $5. Because again, this is a cool little pool area. I like this. Any game that you set up to do that is essentially not a game so much as an asset factory. And increasingly, this is what I kind of see games being, is asset factories. They essentially take a bunch of assets that you could potentially buy or create yourself and create spaces that are compelling. You're like, ooh, shiny water. You create spaces that are compelling and interesting to look at, but don't provide the same depth of interactivity that you might see somewhere else. And again, I don't want to poke fun at the maker of Pools, because again, you don't want to make fun of a single person that made a bunch of assets and threw it together and called it a game. What I would rather poke fun at is when big budget titles kind of end up doing the same thing, right? So again, if one gentleman can take a bunch of assets in a level maker or a graphics engine like Unreal Engine and essentially make a interesting space out of it, a AA game or a AAA game should be able to do that and more, because there's a bunch of people working in that office, right? Potentially speaking, I should not this Pools game for $10 is about on par with a lot of the shovelware you will see on things like Game Pass or that's being run through Unreal Engine 5 right now. Again, a lot of these games are essentially pretty to look at and not much else. And that's a problem, right? That is the problem. As gaming technology gets better, interactivity with the player should improve. It should not decrease. And again, I'm not making fun of the creator of Pools or this indie game, because it's expected that interactivity will not be there when it's one person making the game. We can't always get a Super Meat Boy, for example. That's just not going to be the case. And even Super Meat Boy was made by two people. But yeah, as visuals and graphics get better, interactivity should not be sacrificed in the name of those visuals. So again, this is what I would consider a Myst-like experience. No puzzles, but just walking and enjoying the assets. Ooh, shiny water. Ooh, shiny tiles. That sort of thing. And then the better, PC that you have, the better it's going to look. But ultimately, that's what this game is. It is shiny textures, it is shiny water models in Unity. And I did take off some of the things, like there's like a dirt on the lens and, you know, a little bit of like motion blur and stuff to like not make the experience look about as hollow as I'm showing it off here. I turn that off. I hate motion blur. It's you know, basically a way of disguising bad game design. We're not bothering with that. But this is pools. Like this is the game. Let's see if we can try to find a. We've mostly been going in circles right now, so let's see if we can actually find a way out of this maze. But yeah, you know, this is actually, I like this area. It's kind of nice. They got rid of the ladder. That's something. That's a little bit of something going on. But yeah, it is very challenging for me as a longtime gamer to look at something like pools and then compare it to something like Days X. And you could say, again, it's an unfair comparison. It's a $10 one-person indie game versus, you know, what was at the time a major design team of probably 20 people. But again, that comparison stands. Like, I'm using this as like a lens to view all of modern gaming as opposed to poking fun at the gentleman that made the game. And as a lens to view all modern gaming, this is kind of it. When I look at a lot of modern games, they are essentially pretty to look at, but not that interactive. And in that sense, Pools is not doing anything different from a modern AAA studio. Pretty textures, pretty reflections, not a ton of interactivity. And the thing I can say about the Pools guy, at least, is he's taking those assets in the Acid Factory style of game design, and he's at least making shapes and making an environment that is somewhat interesting to look at. Like, I like this corridor here. He copy and pasted the same tiles in like a depth of field kind of way that I like quite a bit. So, you know, there's a couple things that I like about it. But for the most part, it's just like Acid Factory, Unreal Engine / Unity, copy-paste. Right? And like that is more or less what gaming has devolved into, and that's a major problem in my opinion. I went from, you know, in the last video doing big Icarus landings and double man takedowns and sneaking and managing energy and health bars and doing all of these things in a game that looks good, to playing games that also look good but don't offer me any of that flexibility at all. And again, people are going to say, don't pick on the Pools guy. I'm not picking on the Pools guy. We're using it as a lens to view modern gaming. Because again, nothing that this gentleman is doing is unlike what the AAA studios are doing. Like, for example, Star Wars Outlaws is doing the same thing the Pools guy is doing, but on a much larger scale. And that's why nobody wanted to buy Star Wars Outlaws. Basically, pretty looking, not fun to play, not highly interactive or interesting. Again, you can take an Acid Factory style of level design and you can multiply it by whatever scale you want to. You can make it bigger, you can make it broader, you can make it, you know, they say like deep as an, or wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle. That's basically modern game design. While I prefer, you know, I prefer the water to be quite deep, and I'm happy if it's not as broad. Right? Reduce the scope if you have to, but give me interactivity. I would much rather have a Super Meat Boy over a Pools. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Super Meat Boy offers me more than Pools does. This is a nice space. Like, again, this is a nice one. But this is mostly Pools, right? It's just like wandering through copy and pasted assets. And that's literally exactly how I see. We'll try going down the ladder and see if that makes a difference. But like that's literally how I see modern game design. It's just like pretty, nice to look at, about as deep as what we're looking at right here, which is nothing, right? That's, you know, wide bodies of water, but very shallow. And in that sense, Pools is the perfect metaphor to examine modern game design. Because that's literally what we're wading through, is shallow pools. But yeah, again, don't design your games to be shallow. Like, again, that's all I can say is I grew up in the 90s and every game was deep. right? If you booted up Dungeon Keeper was a deep game. If you booted up Total Annihilation was a deep game. There's no two ways about it. If you booted up Command and Conquer was a deep game. Every single game was a deep game. Like, people still play StarCraft in South Korea today because it is an exceptionally deep game. Not because it's an exceptionally pretty game. It wasn't even pretty on launch. It was not a good-looking game. But it had layers, like an onion. You know, a good game is like an onion. It should have layers. That's really all I can say. But do you guys agree? Do you find that modern gaming has essentially devolved into a nothing burger, as I've heard it be referred to before? A nothing burger essentially being, you know, 2 patties and no meat, or basically being 2 buns and no meat and no lettuce in the middle. There's nothing to sink your teeth into, therefore there's nothing of value. There are a few exceptions, mind you. I think Atomic Heart looked pretty and was deep. I think Atomic Heart was a very good game. It essentially played like a Half-Life title. It essentially played like a BioShock title. It was a modern game that both looked exceptionally pretty on modern hardware, like the Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X. It looked exceptionally pretty, and it was, you know, simultaneously a good game. It had depth. I like this space. This is pretty. Alright, well, I assume we're going to dive off the diving board into the pool here. And that's kind of going to be the extent of it. I'm not sure if any of these areas are still worth looking at. We can keep exploring some more. I assume that's where the level ends. Like, I would like to ride some of these slides at some point, which you probably do in some of the other chapters, but we're just playing Chapter 1 because, again, as much as I am happy that individual game designers are finding work, I don't necessarily want to be giving money to Acid Factory style game design. Okay, we'll go off the ladder, off the diving board here, and end the level, but I really want to be encouraging and giving money to the right things, right? Super Meat Boy is a video game that has infinite depth and complex. It's infinitely deep and complex. Okay, so apparently that just kills you. Infinitely deep and complex. Super Meat Boy. You know, Darkest Dungeon is a game that is infinitely deep and complex, and I'm pretty sure they spent like 10 years basically adding DLC to that game with new characters because, you know, that was the title, is it had room for that kind of expansion. Stairs up. You know, I don't think you would want to add DLC to pools. Not me personally, I would not want to do so. And like every now and then a little spooky sound will play or whatever, but like I grew up on like the scariest survival horror games imaginable, so like a little spooky sound is not going to make a difference to me. Can I go up the slide? Yeah, but that's basically gaming today. Is like, I would say that this is what gaming has turned into in 2024, is pretty textures, copy and pasted for maximum effect, not offering you any sort of substantial experience beyond, hey, isn't this pretty and neat to look at? And like, yeah, it is. It is pretty and neat to look at. It's a liminal space. This is very calming. I guess if you have like anxiety and you just want to explore a nice watery space, you know, I feel less anxious going through this, but I also can't say that there's, you know, much of interest happening. Oh hey, look, a giant rubber ducky. Isn't that cute? Again, I grew up on Fatal Frame and like Resident Evil and Silent Hill at like the age of 8. So again, there's nothing here is gonna like spook me or make me feel even slightly uncomfortable. You need interactivity with the player. Now, you want to talk about scary. I think PT is like the scariest thing in the entire world. PT, if you don't know, was like the Silent Hills demo, playable teaser, and it was entirely a liminal space experience, and it was probably designed with a small team, and it was made by Hideo Kojima, and it's scary as hell because all they needed to do was add an antagonist, like some sort of interactivity to make you feel uncomfortable, right? And without that being here, there's really nothing that's going to make me feel uncomfortable. Oh yeah, we get the demo of slide. Peak interactivity here. We get the demo of the slide off for you guys. Whee! Fun. Again, I'm not a hype guy. Like, you'll see the big difference is that YouTubers that push hype are people who get paid to do so, right? Like, think about any YouTuber that you like, and they are getting paid big ad dollars to be hype men. They will play the exact same game that I'm playing right now, which is pools, and tell you it is the best thing they have ever played in their entire lives. It is scary, it is surreal, it is spooky, it is mind-bending, it is mind-blowing. I will not tell you that. I will tell you after 30 years of gaming, there is nothing in this game that is going to be intimidating for me. I think the one thing that the game has going for it is perspective. So if you don't know, in cinematography, you have things like, if certain geometry lines up in a certain way, the eye will give you like limited perspective, and it's like a really interesting effect. And we're just not getting that here. It is neat though, like again, some of the ways the light is reflecting off the water is actually slightly unsettling. Like it starts to creep up on you, the liminal space stuff. So I do agree that, arranging assets in a certain way, like this guy, hello big Mr. Duck, I do agree that arranging assets in a certain way can have an unsettling quality. But that being said, it's not going to be as scary as a Fatal Frame. Now, it'd be really cool if this duck moved, right? So like if I walked around the one side of the duck and then the other side of the duck and then the duck moved, that'd be great, because then like something's happening in the game. But no, Mr. Ducky's always going to be there. Good Mr. Ducky, you stay. But yeah, this has been Pools. I'm going to continue to try to get to the end of the playable demo, but I'm really struggling. Like I'm struggle busting through this, guys. I gotta be honest. I like these hands here. Like there's like some hands. Can I go down with you, buddy? No? See, like that was something. I want to know why there's hands there. But again, a pair of hands is not going to freak me out when I was like playing Fatal Frame as like at 12 years old. Like Fatal Frame 2 and Fatal Frame 3 are two of the scariest games in existence, period, full stop, that I played as a kid. And then more recently, the scariest game I can think of is PT. PT is terrifying to this day. In fact, Game Grumps just recently did kind of a review of it after 10 years, and like honestly, it's still creepy as hell. I can physically not play PT, and I have it on my PS4, and it's like, it's actually, you can't buy it anymore. It was delisted off of stores, off PlayStation stores, PT, which is a crying shame because it is like the scariest game in existence. I'm going to hold on to my PlayStation 4 forever just because of PT, because I cannot physically get it anywhere else. And it's one of the scariest liminal space games in existence. I like this. This is something different. So presumably this is the end of the demo now. I thought it was the last diving board, but it's going to be this diving board. Whee! Geronimo! No jump button. Whee! Yeah, so that was Pools. I did want to take a look at it on stream for you guys, but that's basically it. I'm not going to, again, give the guy $10 for more of this because, like I said, I'm an interactive player. I'm not a visual player. This is Eternal King, signing out.